crime, this is our sin, but I still believe, through the pain, through the grief, through the lies, through the storms, through the cries, and through the wars. No, I still believe. These waves to cover me, I've turned and tossed upon the waves. When the darkness comes, I feel the grave, but I still believe, through the cold and through the heat, through the rain and through the tears, through the crowds and through the cheers. No, I still believe.
Good afternoon, everyone. It would seem that I've forgotten to turn on my webcam once again, so let's fix that real quick. There we go. And let's get the call going. Welcome to the stream, everyone. We have a lot to talk about today. I hope. Hey there, let me make sure we get the audio capture going and get the Discord capture as well. Game window, Discord. Here we go. Seems everything is in order.
Great to hear.
All right. So what do you have anything you want to cover today, Rick?
Yes, today I will be covering the Exodus from Egypt.
Ooh, nice. Um
Yeah, I just read through that whole story this week, so today I just like to give just a recap of the key events.
and we'll bookend it perfectly too because I actually just got done with Deuteronomy and I'm about halfway through Joshua now. They just taken
Ah,
Jericho.
perfect.
So there we go. We got it. We got little bookends going on here.
Neat, perfect. I guess in that case I have to go first since chronologically my stuff happened first.
All right, I'll leave you to it.
Sweet. All right. So when we last left off in the narrative, the Israelites had just moved to Egypt, and everything seems to be going well. The Egyptians and the Israelites are getting along very well. Everyone's having a good time. But then one day, the current pharaoh dies, and a new one comes in who didn't know who Joseph was, or so he had no issue with the Israelites, and basically he forced them into hard labor. He basically put them into slavery, and throughout the next 400 years, the people of Israel would essentially be under the thumb of the Egyptians. And during this time, they would call to God for help. And near the tail end of that period, a boy by the name of Moses was born to in the tribe of Levi. And fortunately, even though Pharaoh had been slaughtering the firstborn of all the Israelites, Moses was one of the babies that got spared, and he was instead raised by the Egyptian princess.
Right. Now
And
remind me, did that decision by Pharaoh come from like some sort of prophecy about someone who would deliver the Israelites? Or was that just more, hey, these guys are getting too numerous, we need to cull the herd?
honestly, definitely the latter, because during this time, the Israelites were actually outnumbering the Egyptians by quite a lot. So, his goal essentially was to, and it's simply the fact that he targeted only the males but spared the females. His goal was basically to wipe out the Israeli line, but keep the women so they could just marry in and sort of wipe out that line, basically.
Jeez.
Granted, he had some hurdles because a lot of people basically disobeyed him, so there was some trouble there. But ultimately, Moses was one of the ones that got spared. And, he'd be raised by the Egyptians, but he ended up fleeing Egypt because he killed one of the slavers after he was oppressing
Right,
one of his
one of the
people.
overseers.
Yeah, so after that, he would go to another land. He would marry that priest's daughter, have a family there, and this is where, in the area where he would encounter God the first time in the burning bush. If I remember correctly, I think it was called like um, Mount Horeb, I believe was the name.
Yeah, I
He
think
would
that's
go
right.
there. Yes,
And
and that's
mind
when
you,
God
the
basically.
whole burning bush thing, there was that was actually sometime after Moses had fled Egypt and started living with, oh God, what was the name of Zipporah's father? Was
Kind
it
of hard to tell. He goes by like two different names. But yeah, he was like the high priest in that region, I believe. But it was like a different religion.
Jethro? That's right. It was Jethro.
You're right. That's correct. Well, one of the two names. There's another name he goes by in the Bible. I don't remember the other name, but we'll call him that for now. Anyways, where was I? Yes. So Moses encounters God in the burning bush. God reveals himself to Moses. He tells him how he has heard the plight of the Israelites, and he has chosen Moses to go in and basically free his people. Granted, Moses had his doubts,
Yeah, he
but
tried to make
eventually,
excuses, and eventually God got kind of annoyed with him.
yeah, basically. But ultimately, what matters is he reunites his brother Aaron, and together they would go to Pharaoh and ask him to allow the people to leave, but not leave right away. He instead asked to leave to go on a retreat to worship the Lord. That's what he asked. But Pharaoh said no, and what would happen is because he said no, God would unleash a series of plagues onto the Egyptians that would ultimately compel Pharaoh to let them go. Now, in total, there were 10 plagues, and the interesting about these plagues is that they would often happen on the Sabbath, which is the day of rest. Naturally, because of Pharaoh's pride and the hardness of his heart, he didn't acknowledge his God's existence or see him as a threat, so
Well, every
he took a long
time
time for him to.
the thing about it is, every time that one of these plagues would happen, Pharaoh would be like, "Yeah, I get it. You guys are legit," and then he'd go back on it like the day after the plague stopped.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate but recurring pattern there. A lot of it had to do with the fact that of the pride in his heart, he just couldn't accept the fact that their God was the God and that was the one true God. He couldn't accept the fact that there was someone more powerful than him, and that was part of that pride, that hardness that prevented him from letting the Lord come into him. And I think I want to clear a misconception about this because some people read like hardness of heart and they're like, oh, what does that mean? Because sometimes it'll say like Pharaoh hardened his own heart, but other times it'll say God hardened his heart. So people be like, what does that mean? Well, what that means is, I think I talked about this before, but the idea is Pharaoh's heart was kind of like clay when and God is like the sun. So when the sun hits clay, it gets hard and turns to concrete. So similarly, when God's presence entered Pharaoh, he didn't except that he rejected him. Because of that, it hardened his heart towards God, which prevented him, which called, well, more accurately, which caused him not to let the people go because he just couldn't accept that God was God, basically.
Right. And you gotta remember the perspective that Pharaoh is coming from to an extent, because I think it does help with with the context. Like, why would Pharaoh do that if this obviously miraculous stuff or hypernatural stuff is going on? And in Egypt, the Pharaoh was seen not just as the ruler of the land, but a god by his people. Um, so I think that part of Pharaoh's motivation for hardening his heart is that he was also worried about his own legitimacy as ruler, and that it was being challenged.
Well, considering that the place got bad to the point where the Egyptians were begging him to let the Israelites go, I think his authority was already being challenged near the end there.
Right, right. Um, yeah, no, I just wanted to point that out because, details can help add context to people's motivations at times.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, if you see yourself as a god, why would you acknowledge any other god's existence that isn't fit into your category thing?
Right, right. Um,
And another detail about these plagues is that they actually contradict the many Egyptian gods that the Egyptians believed in. For example, with the first plague, that was the rebuke of Hapi, who was the god of the Nile,
was that the
because
one?
the
Was that the
Nile
one
was
with the frogs?
no, that's the second one. The first one was actually the god of the Nile, like because the Nile represents the flowing of life. And with the first plague, God turned the whole river to blood,
Blood.
so
That's
naturally they
right.
couldn't drink from that river. The second plague, the one with the frogs, that's the very next plague, the second plague. That was a rebuke of Hek, who was the goddess of life and fertility. The interesting thing about Hek is that the bottom half was like a woman, a female human, but the top half was a frog. So the second plague involved frogs showing up everywhere and
Yeah.
just messing with stuff.
I never understood what's supposed to be so bad about frogs. Um, they're funny. They're and they look cute. I guess if they're literally everywhere, that would make walking kind of difficult. But otherwise, I really don't see what the problem is here.
It could be that the frogs had some kind of disease that was making the Egyptians sick, or they were like eating their food. They could have been like pooping all over the place.
Oh,
It
that
could be
makes
things like that.
sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
You got a bunch of frogs swimming around. You're gonna have a lot of like frog poop. Yeah, keep in mind they do poop.
Yeah,
I hope you
that
realize
is
that.
true. It's got to go somewhere. My favorite joke about the plagues comes from a YouTuber who was talking about a video game, and he's like, "Yeah, Moses just keeps fucking with the RGB settings in the river in this DLC. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but you can deal with it."
Yeah. I will say this though, starting with I believe the fourth plague, the plagues were only affecting the Egyptians. The Israelites who were living in the land of Goshen, they were exempt from the rest of them.
Yeah, that's right. Because it the you'd mentioned in a previous episode how when the plagues were going down, they affected everywhere but where the Israelites were staying.
That was true from the at first it was affecting everywhere, but starting from the fourth plague, that's when they made that distinction where the Israelites were not affected, but everybody else was. And there's kind of a
Oh,
twofold reason for this. The first reason was basically to show the Egyptians their folly, that the gods that they worship in were not real. There is only one true God, and He's the one that's domain over this whole world, and rather than just their land, like the Egyptians believe. But it was also signs the Israelites that not only is their God real, He's fighting for them, and He's going to get them out of there.
right, right. And then we all know how. Well, actually, no, I can't remember most of the 10 plagues. But ultimately, plagues happened, and eventually, after it got so bad that God decided to kill all the firstborns, that didn't have Sheaf's blood painted on the door frame, that's when Pharaoh finally broke and he's like, okay, you guys can go. Get out of here.
Yeah, that was the 10th and final plague, and that's also when the Passover comes into play, which the Jews do celebrate to this day. There's actually a twofold significance regarding the blood in the door for two reasons. Actually, a couple of factors. So first, with the lamb, which was a sacrificial animal, first they couldn't kill right away. They had to wait a week before they did it. This caused them to have sort of a relationship with the animals that when they had to sacrifice it, there'd be a sense of pain in a sense once they had to essentially sacrifice it to do this ritual. And as for the painting of blood on the door, there was a twofold purpose to it. First, many of the Egyptians revered lambs as sort of like gods. So by killing the lamb, it's sort of a that sort of straw that breaks the camel's back
It's
in
a
the sense that by
cultural,
doing
we
this,
do not recognize your gods. Um, we recognize our own gods kind of thing going on there.
yes, that kind of sailed the bridge. So once that happened, there was no chance of them getting back. So much so that once Pharaoh let them go, the Egyptians were practically helping them get out of there so they can leave as soon as possible.
Right, and then Pharaoh still acts like a dumbass and pursues the Israelites out of Egypt.
Yeah, by that point they were well out of Egypt. They actually got to right where the Red Sea was, and the reason why they went there because they actually could have gone through the land of the Philistines, but God led them away from there because there was war going on at the time. If they saw that going on, they want to go back to Egypt, and naturally he didn't want to see that, so he led them away from that part.
Right.
And as for the Red Sea, naturally, when they saw the Egyptians coming, the people were afraid, like, oh no, we're going to die, what's going to happen? And then Moses reached out to God, and God goes, don't worry, I'm going to get you guys out of here. The Egyptians shall not prevail. So he tells Moses to stick his hand out, and when he did so, the sea parted in half, and that allowed the Israelites to cross through the Red Sea and make it to the other side. Granted, the Egyptians crossed too. However, once the Israelites got to the other side, God told Moses to seal his hand, so he closed it. That closed the sea, and the Egyptians were basically buried in the water, killing Pharaoh and all his elite guard.
Right, and in the Bible it says that Pharaoh and his entire army were swept away.
Pretty much. And yeah, once that happened, that basically put an end between the relationship between the Egyptians and the Israelites. From that point going forward, for the most part, the people of Israel pretty much never interact with the Egyptians again. In fact, I think it wouldn't be until several centuries later when there would be some interaction with the Egyptians. Even then, that was long after the Southern Kingdom fell.
Right. Something just occurred to me. Because Pharaoh's
What's that?
firstborn died in the 10th plague, and then Pharaoh's dead, so what happened to the line of succession there?
It's very likely that when Pharaoh died, either his brother or his cousin took over. Because keep in mind, by the time of the Babylonians, there was still a pharaoh in Egypt, so it's very likely
Right,
that
right.
somebody in his family took over after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, and then so after Egypt, the Israelites basically wandered through the desert, and that's where Leviticus and Deuteronomy happens. And I'm
Oh,
trying to...
numbers as well. Don't forget
Oh
numbers.
yeah, Numbers as well. Um, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So yeah, you got three books basically: Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and most of that is the Old Covenant and the law being established under Moses. Other key events are they get to Israel. Moses sends scouts. The scouts are scared of the giant people that live there. They are scared of the 6'2" people that are inhabiting the land, and say, "Hey, look, we can't go in here yet." And God gets mad at the Israelites because you guys are supposed to go in there. You guys are now going to be cursed to wander the desert for 40 years, and only your descendants get to go into the promised land now.
Hmm.
Um, I think by the time they actually get back to the promised land is around the time that Moses keels over. It's not exactly it's not explicitly stated where or when that happens. There is an interesting event surrounding Moses' death. I think we've talked about it before, but what happened is essentially one of the archangels, Gabriel or Michael, comes down to collect Moses, and the devil shows up, and the two have a dispute over the body, and the angel points out, hey, look, you and me are supposed to fight at the end. We both know how this ends. And the devil's like, yeah, you know what? Fine. I'll let you take him because I can't win this fight. And he fucks off back to hell. Um, and then I'm at the part of what was it? Deuteronomy and then Joshua. I'm on Joshua now. And the point I'm at, they had just captured the city. What essentially happened there was the Israelites come to Jericho and wait. I'm trying to remember. Was the woman who helped the Israel spies capture the city, was that Jericho or was that a different city?
No, Jericho was the one with that giant wall where they walked around 7 times and then blew
And
a
then
trumpet on the seventh like circle. I think they
right, I knew
circled
about
the
that
like
part. I'm trying to remember which city it was that they captured with the help of that prostitute spy.
who Rahab.
Yeah, Rahab. Thank you.
That was the first city they conquered. It was not Jericho. I don't remember what the city was called.
Yeah, unfortunately, nobody remembers the city, but everyone remembers the story. Um,
Yeah, yeah, because interestingly enough, Rahab is actually in the line of Jesus.
is she now? I didn't know about that.
Yeah, she is one of 3 women who are referenced in the genealogy of Jesus in both Matthew and Luke. The other two was like Ruth and Bathsheba.
Right, because Bathsheba was David's second wife, and I'm trying to remember who Ruth was. But being from the line of
Ruth,
David, Bathsheba, kind of a foregone conclusion there.
yeah. Ruth is actually David's great grandmother, technically speaking.
Oh,
She was
okay.
originally from the land. She was originally a Moabite. Her and her sister-in-law, they were Moabites. But yeah, basically what happened there was their husbands and their father-in-law passed away. One of them left. Ruth chose to stay with her mother-in-law. Eventually, she would end up with someone on his line of the family, and then he worked with her to procreate and continue her father-in-law's bloodline through the two of them.
Right. Um, but the reason that Rahab helped the Israelites is she had actually heard stories of what happened in Egypt. She recognized, hey, these people are from God. We don't want to mess with them. And so when they captured the city, Rahab and all of her family were spared from the slaughter. Everyone else was put to the sword.
Pretty much. And the interesting part about that is they've known about the events in Egypt for decades because as soon as the Israelites fled from Egypt, the people in the land of Canaan were hearing stories about Egypt. Naturally, they were afraid.
Well, yeah, it'd be
And
kind of hard not to notice that. I know that they didn't have. I know that Pharaoh couldn't just like text the next city over and be like, "Hey, watch out for these guys." But I imagine when your river turns blood red and you got all the shit happening at once that happened to Egypt, other places are gonna notice that.
yeah, pretty much. And that's what was so crazy about the situation because I think I've talked about this before, Alina, but if the Israelites had trusted God and entered the land, it's very likely that God would have just made it so the people were would have fled because they were already super afraid even before the Israelites got there the first time. Had they simply waltzed in, it's very likely the Canaanites would have simply fled at the sight of the Israelites and just ran away. But because they failed to get it the first time, it basically gave the Canaanites time to build up an army to defend themselves.
Right, they
That in
fortified
turn
their
led
city. So,
pretty much, and that led to the wars that we're seeing in Joshua.
yep. Um, and then
It's
of
just so
course everyone
fascinating to
know.
think about.
Yeah, and the
Like you
interesting
don't
thing about the city where with Rahab, it's mentioned at the time of the writing of Joshua. Rahab was still living, and her family were still living among the Israelites to that day. Um,
hmm
and then you have, yeah, after the city with Rahab, I think that was Jericho, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jericho was like the second or third city they conquered. I haven't read Joshua in a while, so I don't remember the exact order.
Right. And then I haven't gotten to the part where they've captured the city. I got to the part where, night before day one, um, a stranger shows up outside of Joshua's tent, and Joshua's like, "Are you with us or are you with the enemy?" And he's like, "Neither. I represent the armies of heaven." And Joshua's immediate reaction is he just falls face first on the ground in reverence. And the angel then gives him the instructions on how to conquer the city. Um, and then the next morning, Joshua goes out, tells the troops, make no let no battle cry out, do not yell. We're simply going to walk around the city for this many days. Um, and then I think he doesn't tell them about the battle cry until the seventh day, if I remember the story correctly. Um,
Yeah, because I think the idea was they would walk around for 6 days on the seventh, which is the Sabbath. That's when you do the shout.
right. And the horn, of course.
Yes, those two.
And so, you guys know how that goes. The city walls fall, all inhabitants surrender, and and Jericho gets conquered by the Israelites. Um, a couple weeks ago, I don't remember if it was last week or the week prior to last week. Um, we talked about the power of prayer and how I was instructed to pray over the door frame of Aaron's room when he and Mom were going through the divorce, and I was like, I could when I was doing that, I couldn't help but think back to the story of Joshua and the wall. Um, I wasn't
Hello?
marching around a room or a building or a city. I was just like placing my hand on a door frame for 6 days, and then on the seventh, I was supposed to put my hand on the door and recite the Lord's Prayer. But I couldn't help but my brain just registered as like, hey, this is kind of like that event. I'm like, yeah, I guess it is. Um,
Uh-oh.
but the two things these events have in common is somebody had to put their trust in
Oh,
God.
it's weird.
Rick, you good? Rick? Uh-oh. Looks like we lost Rick. I'm... Oh, that's new. Um, so our broadcast is going to be broken up into two parts today, it looks like. What was the last thing you heard from me?
You mentioned something about, I think it was about Jericho, I believe.
Okay. So I'll just repeat what I said for that last however many minutes it was. Um, I was when I was praying for Mom and Aaron during the divorce, and doing the 6 days of prayer with my hand on the doorframe, and then on the seventh day, putting my hand on the door and reciting the Lord's Prayer. The story of Jericho couldn't help but come to my mind, and the parallel between these two events is that basically it's a demonstration of faith in God. Um, because you're not under conventional means you're not going to knock down an entire city by just walking around it and then making some loud noise. Um, the ultimate takeaway from the story of Jericho is when you put your faith in the Lord, even the miraculous becomes plausible. You will conquer overwhelming odds, essentially. Oh shoot. Am I still mute? Am I still having connection troubles? Rick, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I'm watching the stream and it looks like the Discord thing is still loading on
Yeah,
like the live.
yeah, it is. I really don't know what that's about. The good news is we've got the audio application capture going on, and that is coming through, so everyone can hear you still. I wish
Ah,
I
perfect.
knew
That's
what was
great.
going on with the Discord though. That's really annoying.
All right. We can probably address that part later. I think for right now, let's just resume our topics and keep the conversation rolling.
Right, right. Um, so where do we go from here?
That's an excellent question. Actually, there is one last detail I forgot to mention regarding the whole Egypt 10 plague saga. So, this relates to actually the archaeology of ancient Egypt. So, how it worked was that most of the houses were made of like bricks that were made of straw, but the doors were made of like this like almost thick metal. And what the Egyptians would do is they would carve their names on the doors. And the reason why they did that was because it was meant to serve as a memorial of them. So when they passed away, there would be something left of them for after they left. And
Oh,
given that the Israelites were there for like 400 years, naturally, as time went on, they sort of gave into a lot of those traditions, including the door thing. So when they smeared the blood on the door, it actually not only did it cover the door, it actually covered their names on the thing. It was just another sign of saying, "Hey, we're not like you guys. We don't believe in your gods. We don't want your traditions. We are our own people."
That's an interesting detail that the Bible leaves out.
Yeah, that was Vito included in actually, it's actually in the Bible Near podcast with Father Mike Spitz. He brought it up because, like, he was talking about the archaeological site and how when they looked at the doors from that time period, they all had like names on the doors.
Interesting. I would guess that it probably shows up in a few study Bibles then.
Yeah, of course. Sometimes the information regarding like the events usually show up in like other texts, especially not just study Bibles, but also books that kind of go over the Bible, like Walking with God. I've referenced that book a couple of times before. Granted, it mainly focuses on the narrative portions of the Bible, but it does add a lot of contextual detail that helps to reinforce many of the events that occur in the narrative portions
Who's the
of the
author of
Bible.
that book? I'm gonna have to look it up and see about adding it to my library of audiobooks.
Oh yeah, sure, happily. Give me one sec. I have to get the book first.
Sure.
All right, so Walking with God is actually written by two authors. Their names are Tim Gray and Jeff
Tim,
Cavins.
is that Gray with an E or an A?
That's an A.
And who was the other?
Jeff Cavins.
Jeff. How do you spell that last name?
Let's see. Cavins.
CAVEINS. Okay.
Yeah, if you go to ascensionpress.com, you'll actually find the book on their website because that's the publisher of this book. There's a lot of great Catholic books on there. It's basically a Catholic bookstore. That's where I get a lot of my books. It's a great resource if you want to learn more about the Catholic faith, beyond just, of course, the Bible, of course. We do have that, but there's other stuff there too.
Right, and bear in mind, you don't necessarily have to be a Catholic to study under the Catholics. I mean, look at me.
Oh no, of course, absolutely not. Anyone is welcome to head over there and read what we have. I think the more people who read that stuff, the better people understand about Catholicism. There's no saying that I believe Father Mike Schmitz said in one of the episodes of the podcast. I can't remember, but some of the lines of a lot of people hate what they think is the Catholic Church, but very few people hate the real Catholic Church.
Right, they hate what they think they know about the Catholic Church.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about the Catholic Church, as well as like Christianity in general. A lot of misconceptions out there, especially given how. I know this game being more to a cultural point, but I think as time has gone on and we as society walked away from God, I think a lot of misconceptions about what we as Christians believe, or in my case, what we as Catholics believe. There's been a lot of misconceptions floating around, and a
Well,
lot of it is unfortunately not based in truth. There's a lot of, false info spreading around. I think that's part of the beauty about this podcast, that we have the opportunity to not just show people the word of God, but also more importantly to show us what we truly believe as Christians.
right, and I think that some level of responsibility falls on our shoulders because the more ignorant Christians out there, um, and certainly the religious right, have spread a lot of those misconceptions and misrepresented Christianity and what we're about. Um, and I will avoid going any further on that topic because that delves into almost political territory, and I'll save that for to be continued. Whether it be the episode that we're doing after this or maybe next week's, I don't know. But I'll try and I want to keep us focused on the theology here. And no, I think that you're absolutely right about us having the opportunity to dispel misconceptions about Christianity here on our podcast. It would be
Yeah, part of the reason.
sorry,
Okay.
I'll let you go.
All right, that's fine. I was gonna say, like, that's actually part of the reason why I spend so much time on the Bible, because a shocking number of people have actually not read it. Like, granted, they might know of like certain stories, like the story of Jesus, or in today's case, they might know the story of Exodus from Egypt. But like, as for majority of the Bible, I feel like most people don't know what actually happens in the Bible because many people just haven't read it.
Right. Well, there's a lot to take in, and there's a lot of parts that even us Christians who have read the Bible can't remember. You and I have joked about how hard it is to remember the lesser prophets.
Well, yeah, of course, that's part of the reason why I've decided to read the Bible every day, every year for the rest of my life. Not only to better understand the scriptures, learn the scriptures, and get closer to God. More importantly, so I'm able to pass what I learn on to others, so they too can attain that knowledge.
Right. Um, and you know, I don't. Did I ever tell you about my? Did we ever go over my rationale for reading the whole Bible front to back? We probably did. In like the second episode where we talked about the dangers of knowledge before we're ready. Um, I, when I was younger, read Revelations far too early. Um, and part of my rationale for reading the whole Bible front to back was, part of my motivation rather, was the idea that maybe if I understand more, I won't be as afraid, which turned out to be true. It also helped knowing that most of Revelations was written in code as a critique of how Rome was treating Christians at the time. I can't remember if Revelations was written under the reign of Nero or Diocletian, because those two emperors were the ones that persecuted Christians the most. Um, I think it was under the reign of Nero because 666 was derived from Nero's name, essentially.
Yes, I actually talked about that when I went over Revelations about a month ago in one of our first episodes of the new year, because I had just finished Revelations at that time. And it's
Yes.
usually aware of those two emperors because there's actually a debate over when Revelations was written. One side argues it was written between like 60, 70, 80. The other half argues that it was written around probably closer to 90 AD, closer to like the end of the first century. Um, and I believe those two emperors reigned during one of those two time periods, so that could tie into there as well.
Right. Um, I'm a big fan of Roman history. One of my favorite YouTube series is a historical satire piece on the history of Rome called The Unbiased History of Rome. And when they get to Nero's reign, they actually briefly reference the writing of Revelation. And Nero can be seen saying, "Is that supposed to be?" When he sees 666, he's like, "Is that supposed to be me or my uncle?"
Oh man, you know what's kind of funny though? Another numbering that's been referenced is also 616 as well.
Really?
I
Where
believe
does
both
that
have.
come from?
I know it's referencing walking with God. I don't remember if it was actually in Revelations or not. I know it's been about 2 months since I read it, so I'm not sure. But yeah, that was one of the two. I might have even been there on the podcast. I'm not on the Bible Near podcast. I don't entirely remember, but that was number that got thrown around at the time.
All right. Well, that's interesting to know. I'll have to look into that more. Um, but yeah, no, after reading the Bible from front to back for the first time, I decided, oh well, might as well do it again. And it took me about 3 years, because I started in 2018 and finished in 21. So that would be 2019, 2020, and 2021. So yeah, 3 years. It took me 3 years to go through the Bible front to back, and that's with the audiobook narration that my Bible app on my phone has. Um, if you marathon it, you can probably get it done in a shorter amount of time. I have this habit where I will like I'll read a book in the Bible, um, and then or sometimes if they're short, I'll read several back to back, and then I'll go and read a different book that fun book rather than study book, um, and then I'll come back to the Bible and read more of it. Um,
I mean, to be fair, the Bible is technically not a book in itself. It's like a collection of books. So
right,
by reading several books, you're actually reading multiple books in a row.
right. It's an anthology of books written by different people, but you get the point. I
Yeah, absolutely.
and I hope that someday I hope that someday the knowledge that I've obtained, not just from reading the Bible, but growing as a Christian and asking theological questions to my pastor and studying under different pastors, um, and different theological texts like the works of C.S. Lewis, um, can help me share the wisdom that I've learned with others who have the same questions. I once watched a video by the YouTuber known as Short Fat Otaku about charity and why socialists hate charity. Now I'm going to avoid the politics here, but I posted a comment that got one of the largest amount of likes on that video, where I talked about how C.S. Lewis defined charity as not simply giving alms to the poor, but the love of strangers, and that is what we were meant to do when God told us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Um, and a lot of people who weren't even Christians actually agreed with that interpretation and liked that comment, and there opened up a lot of discussions there on that channel, or on that comment. And one person actually talked about turning the other cheek, and I told him about C.S. Lewis's article, "Why I'm Not a Pacifist," where he goes over how we should oppose evil when we have the capacity to do so, but that opposition must be tempered with mercy and restraint and proportionate retribution, and that's what Christ meant when he said to turn the other cheek. Not let violence escalate, but rather simply simply apply force in proportion to what's been applied to you. Another interpretation, which I find just as legitimate, of that verse is, don't allow petty insults to turn into an exchange of blows. Which, I would argue is probably the more accurate interpretation. If you're willing to come to blows over petty insults, I would say that's not just wrath there, but you've got a bit of pride going on there as well. If you're willing to get violent over, you know, just an exchange of insults. And I think that a good antidote to pride is the ability to laugh at yourself and not take yourself too seriously. That's why I say the best approach we can have to staying humble is to learn to laugh at ourselves and, learn to take jokes from other people. Because there is a lot about Christianity, and on a broader sense, there's a lot about us humans in general that doesn't make sense to an outsider's perspective. Everyone has moments where they behave in a way that only makes sense to them, I think.
Uh-oh. That's not good.
Rick, did you lose me? Did I lose you again?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, I've switched to the auxiliary network. Hopefully, we won't have any more connectivity interruptions.
Alright, that's good. I think... So I think last time you spoke, you mentioned something about turning the other cheek?
Yeah, I was saying how if you're, I was that was going into how I think humor and learning to laugh at yourself is a good antidote to pride, because we humans, everyone has done something that only makes sense to them. You got to remember to look at yourself from an outsider's perspective at some point and realize, hey, you know what? Yeah, there's some stuff that seems strange or, you know, uh, nonsensical to people who aren't really within the scope, who aren't you. Um,
That kind of reminds me of a saying that Brett's mom Brett Cooper's mother would say to her. I believe, if I remember correctly, because she doesn't even remember it entirely herself, but if I remember it correctly, it was something along the lines of, take your life seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously.
that's a good saying. And yeah, that's more or less what I've come to the conclusion of with uh, learning to laugh at yourself is a good antidote to pride, basically. Um, I was also talking about how pride, if you're getting angry and exchanging blows over just, insults that people have made towards you, you're probably not just dealing with wrath there, you're probably also dealing with pride. Um, how long have we been at this for?
I think nearly an hour.
Alright, well, you know what? Um, let's Do you have anything you want to add to this?
I was gonna say something about the charity point, but I felt it'd be more appropriate to mention on to be continued. So I'll save that for that podcast.
Okay, cool. I will end the call here, and we can roll into the worship segment, and then after that, we can do to be continued. Now, with to be continued today, I do have to step out very briefly to stir the roast and turn it over at 2:30, but otherwise, should be good.
All right.
All right. Now, hopefully OBS doesn't crash because with the day we've been having, you can't write it off. I will see you in a bit.
All right. See you later, my friend.
And now we come to the worship segment of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. Did I remember to transcribe the Striper songs? Documents, BB worship songs. No, not yet. I still need to do that. So what we will start with is, let's do "Blessed Be the Lord." You know, I was taking the trash cans out very, very late this week, like 11:30 at night, because we have pickup in the mornings on Wednesday, and I had completely spaced on taking them out when it was still daylight. I was actually thoroughly spooked by how dark it was outside. I just got this sense of like dread, and I decided to start playing "Blessed Be the Lord" on my phone, and you know, all of a sudden the sense of dread just evaporated. It was nice. "Blessed Be the Lord" is just a great song in general. Let's do the window capture. Set up the slideshow. And yeah, there we go. Now let's capture. Is that it? There it is. Let's adjust that. No, what on earth? There we go. And then let me make sure the audio capture is being okay. Looks like it. This is "Blessed Be the Lord."
Blessed be the Lord, blessed be the Lord, the God of mercy, the God who saves. I shall not fear the dark of night, nor the arrow that flies by day. He will release me from the nets of sinful men. He will protect me from their wicked hands. Beneath the shadow of his wings I will rejoice, to find a dwelling place secure. Blessed be the Lord, blessed be the Lord, the God of mercy, the God who saves. I shall not fear the dark of night, nor the arrow that flies by day. I need not shrink before the terrors of the night, nor stand alone before the light of day. No harm shall come to me, no arrow strike me down, no evil settle in my soul. Blessed be the Lord, blessed be the Lord, the God of mercy, the God who saves. I shall not fear the dark of night, nor the arrow that
Alright, that was Blessed Be the Lord. Let's move on to our second song of the day. You know what? Yeah, let's do this one. This song in particular means a bit to me. It's one of the few times where I've been at worship and I have felt like the presence of the Holy Spirit like actually like impact me. When I first heard this song, I just started. I couldn't sing. I was tearing up. Because I had thought about how I had been thinking about how broken I was as a person and as a Christian. And you know, there have been points in my life where I felt like I've let God down, not just myself. I can live with letting myself down, but letting God down, that hurts. That hurts a lot. And this song's message is, I know. That's why I came for you. This song is Come As You Are by Crowder.
Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, let rescue begin. Come find your mercy, oh sinner, come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who've strayed. Come sit at the table. Come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't cure. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. Lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are. Come as you are. For the morning, oh sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow that
heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. Alright, that was Come As You Are by Crowder. That is one of the, that is the second song by CCL, that we sang at CCLG that I've incorporated into the worship roster here. Our next song is going to be Earthen Vessels. Let's see. Slideshow, start from first slide. And let's open the second, or no. Yeah, here we go. We hold a treasure not made of gold, in earthen vessels, wealth untold. One treasure only, the Lord, the Christ, in earthen vessels. Light has shone in our darkness, God has shone in our hearts, with the light of the glory of Jesus the Lord. We hold a treasure not made of gold, in earthen vessels, wealth untold. One treasure only, the Lord, the Christ, in earthen vessels. Alright, and that was Earthen Vessels. Now it's time for something a little bit different. We're going to do The Savior again because, one, I really like that song, and two, it's important to remember that God is coming back. He will be back someday. And this song is that reminder. There we go. must go. I'll wait for you to follow. No turning back, but there's a light, I've seen it all. Riding through, never fall. When all is done, must be one. I will return. Yeah! Savior is calling. He's riding through the night. He's the only, the holy, returning from the light. Fall to the ground and we pray that he's the one. No demons left in this world, he has won. Oh, hear what I say, all men come to see the King of the world. The time has come for everyone. The Savior stands for all of us. Now praise the one who'll destroy the evil abyss of the void. His armor still shining, though it's torn from the fight. The brave man, Redeemer, he brought us back to life. Oh, yes, he did. Now fall to the ground and pray, because he will come. The one. No demons left in this world, since he has won. Now listen to what I say. All men come. See the land of the free. The time has come for everyone. The Savior stands for all of us. And I praise the one who'll destroy the evil abyss of the void. The evil abyss of the void. fall to the ground and we pray, 'cause he's the one. No demons left in this world, since he has won. Oh, hear what I say, all men come, see the King of the world. The time has come for everyone. The Savior stands for all of us. Now praise the one who'll destroy the evil abyss of the void. The evil abyss of the void. The evil abyss of the void. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we end the worship segment of Branch Brothers. Thank you all for being here today. I'm glad to see that we've had some people join us. Even one person is still one person, and thank you all for being here. I am going to briefly step out, and then we will do To Be Continued with Rick. So hope to see you all there.